triangles. Students will be able to find side lengths in special right triangles. Okay? All right, so first thing I want you to do is I want you to work out this problem. It says find the length of the hypotenuse of the 45, 45, 90 triangle. This right here is your right angle. This side has a length of 1. This side has a length of 1. It wants you to find your hypotenuse. Okay? So, to do that, I need to first do the Pythagorean theorem. Javier, can you remind me, what's the Pythagorean theorem again? Perfect. Now, I need to figure out which side is the hypotenuse. Ryan, which of these sides would you say is the hypotenuse? Yeah, the one opposite the right angle. So this side here is the hypotenuse. So that's your C. Okay? So that's what you would plug in for your C. And then you plug these in for A and B. So we would do 1 squared plus 1 squared equals x squared. And you can do this anywhere on your paper. Just work it out. Now, next question. What is 1 squared, Nate?
1.
So 1 plus 1 equals x squared. And now the toughest question ever asked in math. Alex, what's 1 plus 1?
3. 2.
2.
You're wrong.
So 2 equals x squared. And what do I do next to solve that, Logan?
Square root it.
Yeah, we square root both sides. Now, if you type in the square root of 2, you're going to get a decimal. That's because the square root of 2 is an irrational number. We want the exact answer. We don't want an estimate. We want the exact. And the only way to get that exact would be just to leave it as the square root of 2. So the square root of 2 equals x. So this side here is the square root of 2. Leave it exact. Leave it as the square root of 2. Okay. All right. Now, from a previous chapter, what type of triangles do you see shown here? Isosceles triangles, and they're right. Well, if this is isosceles and these two sides are the same, what does that mean about these two angles? They're congruent. And if this one's 90, what would each of these be?
45.
45. So each of these are 45. Okay. What about this right triangle? What would these two angles be?
45.
What about this right isosceles triangle?
45.
Now, they're not all the same size, so I know they're not congruent, but all of the angles are congruent to each other. So instead of congruent, what do we call these? Just took a test over it last week. Similar triangles. And we know similar triangles are proportional. So for instance, if this side right here is 1 and this side is 3, what is my scale factor from the little triangle to the big triangle? Other way. 3 over 1, which is 3. So to find the missing sides, let's say if this side was 1, I would just have to multiply it by 3. So what would this side here be?
3.
Well, you know previously that this right isosceles triangle, the hypotenuse is the square root of 2. How can I find the length of this hypotenuse?
Multiplied by 3.
Multiply this by 3. So 3 times the square root of 2 is just 3 square roots of 2. Okay. What about this big triangle? What if I said this side was 6? What would this side down here be?
6.
What do you think the hypotenuse would be?
6 square root of 2.
Okay, what if I did another right isosceles triangle? And I told you this side was 10, which makes this side 10. What do you think the hypotenuse is going to be?
10.
Notice you didn't have to use Pythagorean theorem. You just know. Okay, so that's a rule. Right there at the top, you're at your paper. You see where it says 45, 45, 90 triangle theorem? You're going to need to fill in the blank. It says in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is the square root of 2 times as long as each leg. So you don't even have to use Pythagorean theorem if it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle. If you know the leg, all you got to do is multiply it by the square root of 2, and that's the hypotenuse. And then the other leg is going to be the exact same as the first leg, because it's isosceles. The only thing you have to make sure it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and you do that by either they give you one of the angles as 45, or they tell you it's isosceles by either giving you the sides or marking them congruent. All right, and then you see the triangle. Right below it is a spot for a formula. Write this formula. The hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. The hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. So write that formula down. This formula is going to be your best friend, because it's going to make your life easier. All right, before we get started, what questions do you have for me? Okay. All right, let's do an example. It says find the value of x and write your answer in simplest form. Okay, so first thing I need to do is figure out which one's the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. So that makes this side here my hypotenuse. So I'm going to label that the hypotenuse. And that automatically makes this right here my leg and this a leg. And how I can tell it's 45, 45, 90. There's 90, there's 45. That automatically makes this angle 45.
Does it have to be, I don't know if is the 2 lesser values the leg?
Yeah, the hypotenuse is always the biggest. Okay, so next thing you're going to do is you're going to write the formula down. So you need to write hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. Well, the hypotenuse is x, so for hypotenuse I'm going to plug in x equals the leg, I plug in 8 times the square root of 2. Now it says write it in simplest form. That means exact. That means they don't want no decimals. Don't be putting no decimals there. And 8 times the square root of 2, there's nothing I can do to simplify that, so I just do 8 square roots of 2. And that's my answer. You're going to want to treat the square root of 2 like it's a variable, because there's really nothing you can do with it unless you multiply it by another radical. So for instance, if I did the square root of 2 times the square root of 5, that would be equal to the square root of 10. The square root of 2 times the square root of 3, that would equal the square root of 6. Alright, so that's all the way back from algebra. But if you're multiplying a whole number by a radical, there's nothing you can really do. You just treat it like it's a variable. Okay. Alright, before we do some examples together, what questions do you have for me? Okay, let's do this one. First thing you need to do is fill in that missing number, 5 square roots of 2. Find the value of x, write your answer in simplest form. So first you need to figure out is it a 45, 45, 90, and since those two sides are x, I know that they're congruent, so that makes the angles congruent, which makes them each 45, so I'm good. Now you want to start off with your formula. Kaylee, can you remind me, what was that formula again that was given to us on the front page? Hypotenuse equals the length times the square root of 2. Don't forget the hypotenuse part. Good job. Okay. Now, look at your triangle. What side would be considered the hypotenuse, Carter?
5
You need 5 square roots of 2? 5 times the square root of 2? How did you know that side was the hypotenuse?
Because the leg, so 2 45, and then you said earlier the hypotenuse is always the lowest. So.
Yeah, so the two legs are the two sides that are congruent, which is x, and then 5 square roots of 2 would be the hypotenuse. So for hypotenuse, I'm going to plug in 5 square roots of 2. And Emily, what would I plug in for my leg? X. So for your equation, you have 5 square roots of 2 equals x times the square root of 2. Now, going all the way back to algebra. Addition and subtraction are opposites. Multiplication and division are opposites. So I'm trying to get x by itself, and I'm multiplying by the square root of 2. How could I get x by itself? Divide. So you're going to divide both sides by the square root of 2. Now, anything divided by itself is 1. So the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2 is 1. So they cancel. And I just have x. What happens over here on the left side?
It cancels in 5 stays.
They cancel and the 5 stays. So you get 5 equals x. Now, does it make sense that the legs are each 5 if the hypotenuse is 5 times the square root of 2? Yeah. All right, let's do another one together. First thing you need to do is fill in the missing number. 2 square roots of 2. 2 square roots of 2. So first, tell me, Dakota or Randy, which side is my hypotenuse?
Yeah, that's 2. That's 2.
Perfect. So there's my hypotenuse. And Tyler, can you tell me again, what's that formula?
The leg times square root of 2.
What does that equal?
Hypotenuse.
Perfect. So the hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. Dakota, what am I going to plug in for my hypotenuse?
2 times the square root of 2.
And Drake, what am I going to plug in for my leg? Perfect. And Luke, what am I going to do to solve for x here?
Divide by square root of 2.
And I got to do that to both sides because I got to keep the scales balanced. And Dylan, what happens here? These cancel. What about these over here? And so, Daniel, what's x going to equal? 2. X equals 2. Perfect. Now, what questions do you have for me? Okay. All right, Alex, can I get you to go up there with Javier? You're going to be working with him. Kaylee, can I get Randy, can I get you to go up there and move with Kaylee, please? And then Daniel and Dylan, can I get y'all to turn around and work with Harrison, please? And all right, this next problem, you're going to work with your partner, and Drake, you'll just turn around and you and Luke will work together. First thing you need to do is fill in the missing parts. And then you and your partner need to work this problem out together. So fill in the missing parts, then work it out together. Will you type in your calculator the square root of 4 and what you get? So you type in your calculator the square root of 4 and what you get? Alright, if I can have your attention, please. On this problem, you should have gotten y equals 2. Let's turn our heads up, please. Okay, so you should have gotten y equals 2. And let me show you the reason why. Y is your hypotenuse. And it's hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. The hypotenuse is y, and a leg is the square root of 2. So you have the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, so y equals the square root of 4. And if you type in your calculator the square root of 4, you're going to get 2. Now, this works with anything, because the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the same thing as the square root of 2 squared. And a square root and a squared cancel each other out. So you're just left with 2. So that works with any number. So if you have the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, that's just going to give you 3. The square root of 8 times the square root of 8 is 8.
That's not 64.
8 times 8 is 64. What's the square root of 64?
8.
8. The square root of 1,234 times the square root of 1,234 is going to be 1,234. So if you multiply a square root times a square root, the same thing, you're just getting what's underneath the radical sign. Okay. And that works with any number. All right, here's your next one. Do this one with your partner. Fill in the 7 and the x first, and then work that one out together. X is already boxed up, so you don't have to solve it. It's just that it's perfect. Alright, for this one here, you should have gotten that x equals 7 times the square root of 2. Okay? Would anyone like to see me work that one out?
I would.
This side here is your hypotenuse. And your hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. The hypotenuse is x, and your leg is 7. So x equals 7 times the square root of 2. And 7 times the square root of 2 is 7 square roots of 2 in simplest form. Alright, go ahead and go back to your original seat. And let's move on to chunk 2. Alright, so let's not do that, please. These chairs are not very sturdy.
Mine goes all the way there.
Yeah, let's not do that, please. You'll break it. Alright, it says find the value of the variable. Chunk 2. 45, 45, 90 is one special triangle. 30, 60, 90 is the other special triangle. It says, in a 30, 60, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is twice as long as the shorter leg, and the longer leg is the square root of 3 times as long as the shorter leg. Go do them. equal the sides of the triangle. So the shorter leg is x. The hypotenuse is 2 times x. The longer leg is x times the square root of 3. Now my question to you is, how did I know that this one was the shorter leg and not this one? By the angles. This angle's 30, that one's 60. 30 is smaller than 60, so the side opposite of 30 will be shorter than the side opposite of 60. So this is my shorter, this is my longer, this is always my hypotenuse, and your hypotenuse is always the longest side, always. All right, so then you have 2 formulas to write down at the bottom. Sorry. Right there, I need you to write those 2 formulas down, please. The hypotenuse equals the shorter leg times 2. So if you know the shorter leg, you just multiply it by 2 to get the hypotenuse. And the longer leg, you take the shorter leg and multiply it by the square root of 3.
So it's still the same formula, hypotenuse equals leg,
Not the exact same formula.
but x, the square root of 3.
Let me show you an example. Find the values of x and y. Write your answer in simplest form. First, you need to figure out which one's your hypotenuse, short leg, and long leg. The hypotenuse is always opposite the 90-degree angle. So this side's my hypotenuse. 30 is my smaller angle. So this side would be my short side. And this side's my long side. Alright, so it says the hypotenuse is the short side times 2, but I don't know my short side yet, so I can't find my hypotenuse yet. So I need to do the long leg first. It says that your long leg equals your short leg times the square root of 3. Well, my long leg's 9, so 9 equals, my short leg is x times the square root of 3. Now to solve it, we're going to do exactly like we did before, but this time we're going to divide by the square root of 3. These cancel, but there's nothing to cancel this. And in math, you're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator. So you're going to have to multiply the denominator by something to get rid of the radical. Well, if you recall earlier, remember how I told you that the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2? Well, the same, it goes for square root of 3. So to get rid of the radical, I'm just going to multiply it by the square root of 3. But you got to keep your scales balanced. So whatever you do to the bottom, you also got to do to the top. Okay. Well, 9 times the square root of 3 is just 9 square roots of 3. And the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. Got my 3. And that equals x. Now, last thing you need to do is check to see if you can reduce 9 divided by 3. Can I do 9 divided by 3? What's 9 divided by 3? So my answer is 3 times the square root of 3 equals x. No, because 9 divided by the square root of 3 is different than 9 square root of 3. Oh, you have one of those calculators? That calculator will do all that work for you. So do 9 divided by the square root of 3, and it will do everything for you. There you go. That's a good thing about having those calculators. Alright, we're not finished. You still gotta find y. So my short side is 3 square roots of 3. Well, our formula says that the hypotenuse equals the short side times 2. So the hypotenuse is y. My short side is 3 square roots of 3, and I multiply that by 2. Now, you're going to treat the square root of 3 like it's a variable. So it's like 3x times 2. Well, if that was 3x times 2, you would do 3 times 2 is 6, and so it'd be 6x. Same thing here, 3 times 2 is 6, so y would be 6 times the square root of 3. Now, these are a little bit more difficult than the previous ones, and usually, people tend to have a lot of questions. Let's do another one together before we answer any questions.
Oh, I like this.
Alright, so first thing I need you to do is fill in the missing numbers. You should have the square root of 3 and x, so you need to label those first. It says find the value of the variable, write your answer in simplest form. So the first thing you need to do is decide where's your hypotenuse, which one's your short leg, and which one's your long leg. Harrison, which one's your hypotenuse?
You don't know. It's up there.
Which of these sides is the hypotenuse?
The one opposite from that is.
Yeah, this one here's the hypotenuse. Okay? Javier, which one's my long leg? Ryan, which one's my short leg? Alright, Nate, which formula am I going to use to find x?
Longer leg equals shorter leg times the square root of 3.
Alex, what am I going to plug in for the long leg?
Oh, sorry.
Well, this side's my long side, so what's the length of this side? Well, you want to help him out?
We never know. What's your good?
What's this right here?
X.
So I'm going to plug in x for the long leg. Okay, Noah, what am I going to plug in for the short leg?
The square root of 3.
Times the square root of 3. Kaylee, what's the square root of 3 times the square root of 3? Just 3.
Yeah, good job.
I think you were thinking like too complicated.
Yeah, because I'm going to the point is way harder than this one. That's true.
Okay. Now, what questions do you have for me? Hey, let's do another one together.
One day we'll tell me the same thing.
You need to fill in the missing numbers. You got 4, 4, 2, and 2. Hey, that's my question for you. Look at the black triangle. Look at the black triangle. What type of triangle is it? The black one's not a right triangle.
Oh,
It's equilateral. Because this side is 4, this side is 4, and this whole side here is 4. Let's get our heads up, please, so that way I know we're awake. So all 3 sides are 4. What do we know about the angles of an equilateral triangle?
Equilateral.
They're all the same So they're all 60. So this one's 60, this one's 60. What about each of these up here? What would they have to be then? 30. Now, to make this a little bit easier on me, I'm going to redraw this triangle, but without this side over here. I'm just going to draw this right triangle. So I have this side of length 2, that side of length H, and then my hypotenuse, of length 4.
Yes.
Let me make that a little bit bigger. This angle here was 60, this one was 30, this is 4, and this is 2. So I've got to find H. I've got to figure out H. So my question to you is H the short side, the long side, or the hypotenuse?
Yes.
It's going to be the long side. Why is it the long side?
Yes.
It's clearly longer than the others.
It's opposite the 60-degree angle. So what formula am I going to use, Tyler, to find H?
The short side times the long side.
Go back to chunk 2. Go back to the beginning of chunk 2 and look at the formulas. Which of those 2 formulas am I going to use?
The longer leg one.
And what does it say the longer leg equals?
The times the square root of 3.
What times the square root of 3?
The longer leg. Short leg.
The short leg. It's the short leg times the square root of 3. Do you have this written down right there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What am I going to plug in for the long leg, Carter?
H.
What am I going to plug in for the short leg, Randy?
2.
Times the square root of 3. Luke, what's 2 times the square root of 3?
3.4.
We don't want to dance decimal. It says in simplest form, which means exact.
2 times the square root of
2
3.
times the square root of 3. And there you go. Okay. Now what questions do you have for me? Okay. You need to write down the missing numbers to this one and find the value of X and Y. So you need to write down the X, the Y, and the 9 and write your answers in simplest form. And you're going to do this one with your partner. So you need to go back to the table with your partner and work this out with your partner. Alright, you need to be working this problem out.
Why is this hypotenuse? Why? We're going to use the y. The other thing was
Why is the hypotenuse? Oh, no, that's X. Okay, never mind.
X is the long leg, so X equals
I think we're gonna be wrong.
No, you're good.
I never trust myself.
Alright, if I can have your attention, please. On this one, you should have gotten that X equals 9 square roots of 3, and you should have gotten that Y equals 18. Does anyone need to see me work that one out? Okay, try the next one. First thing you need to do is fill in the missing numbers. X, Y, and 3 square roots of 3.
This is really hard. One way equals.
Make sure you find X and Y. Write out your formula first, like how we wrote these out. Write that out first, and then plug it in for them, so you know where to put in your X and where to put in your 3 square roots of 3. No, yeah, this is just so you know it's a 30, 60, 90. Like if you know it's a right triangle and this one's 60, you should automatically know that that's 30. If it's 45, you should know it's 45. Those are the only two special right triangles, 30, 60, 90, 45, 45, 90. Alright, if I come by and tell you that you and your partner are good, then you can get your stuff ready and we'll finish the rest tomorrow. If I tell you and your partner you're good.
Murder is my friend.
Okay, can I see some more work on that one, please? The first one on how you got that. It's on quizzes. 10.1, back read down. Yeah, your Excel, you need to show your work there. Alright, y'all are good? Wait. Will you show Dylan how to get the X? Because he did not do that part correct. You're good? You need to find Y. Oh, there's X, and Y. Okay.
As long as you know the my
That's 3 square roots of 3 divided by square root of 3. So what's 3 square roots of 3 divided by square root of 3? Like if these answers, what's left? Alright, y'all are good to go. Don't forget you have a homework assignment. It's already been posted on Google Classroom. It's a quiz assignment.
Shut up,